So we are streaming live to YouTube. We're ready when you are, Mayor McClure.
I'll call to order this work session of the Seward City Council. It's Monday, June 9th. It is 6 p.m. and the purpose of this is to discuss the future use of the Jesse Lee home property. And we have a packet here. And there were copies up there. And the way I want to do this is have administration tell what the parameters are and your thoughts. I think at that point I'll let the public, if they have any input, and then we'll bring it back to council.
Okay.
So, okay, admin. That would be Jason.
Okay.
This is Jason's hard work on this packet and everything.
So what I'd like to do, just to kind of go through everything, is just go through kind of what I have this organized more or less on a page by page scenario, and then you guys can ask questions kind of along the way. So just to give a little bit of background, the last time that we really dug into this was spring of 2022. We had 2 special meetings, and that's when we had that really massive packet. We had a detailed presentation by the engineer that's done a lot of the work on there, KCI, on the mitigation efforts for the demolition and site mitigation, just to give kind of that really long background and history of what they've encountered and why we're kind of sitting where we're at on mitigation pieces. And then since then, we did have an action memorandum, which we'll dig into specifically a little bit later, but that was 2023-005, which gave the SCLA kind of a memorial placement area on the southwest corner, and I do have that a little bit here later in the packet. So, but previous, it's important I think to review the survey that was conducted in November, December of 2020, and there were over 300 respondents to that survey that was done, and so you can see the responses there. Over 68% of the respondents believe that either all or majority of the site should be used as a park. Over 78% of the respondents believe that a memorial should be placed on the site of the Jesse Lee home property. And then there's some also things about respondents about what they believe as far as having enough park open space. The housing, 39% of respondents believe that Seward has enough multifamily residential options to support the population, and 37% believe that there was not. 24% were undecided, so that was a very close statistic there. And during those December 2020 community meetings discussions, there were a number of configurations presented and discussed along with the survey results, and those options range from the property being used as all park or all housing, and kind of some different configurations thereof. So, but that right there is just to kind of give you guys, everyone, a little bit of a background of where we're at. So this next page is an expenditure report. So the total expenditures to date that we spent to date are about 1.465 million, and that is rounded. I mean, it's just rounded just to make the numbers a little bit cleaner. So we originally the city originally received a grant for approximately $1.1 million for the mitigation and kind of turn that property into something else. And so from that original $1.1 million, we have structure demolition, removal, and partial environmental cleanup and mitigation that cost approximately like $900,000. There was $25,000 for tree removal. We have memorial benches and signs that were commissioned that were made from pieces of the home, either like wood and or metal, that are being stored currently. There's approximately $40,000 in playground equipment. And this is currently we have that, and it's currently in crates in the electric laydown yard. And then there was some money paid kind of in advance because we had a certain window that we needed to spend all that money, and so it was paid in advance to Metco for property fill, leveling, fence removal to be completed after the mitigation work is done. And so that's going to be an important factor that we're kind of discussing a little bit tonight. So going down, obviously the mitigation on this property has gone far beyond what we expected, and so expenses to date not covered by the grant. As far as mitigation goes, it's approximately $365,000. We do have an additional $65,000 for the next steps that DEC is requiring of us on the agenda for tonight's regular meeting. And so if we take into that expenditure that will take place tonight, we're currently about $1.53 million, and the total expenses not covered by the grant, which is more or less all mitigation, is $430,000. Any questions on that?
Questions? Councilmember Barnard.
Can you remind me why it was contaminated? Is it just like oil from the?
It's oil. It's like a lot of that we're dealing with is spilled diesel fuel and bunker oil. There's also like they found like mercury in there, and I think just there was asbestos on the site that was mitigated, but what's in the ground right now, I think has to do with like arsenic and mercury and diesel fuel.
From basically the double.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, but just to give a brief overview on that $65,000, DEC is requiring us to drill more boreholes that are pretty deep and take samples in different areas, and then they'll tell us what happens after that. So they want to go down pretty far to see if it goes down to groundwater. They want to find groundwater to make sure like how, because the contamination has gone much deeper than they expected.
I thought that was already done, and that we had pretty much where we were to go. We were ready to go on that. It's not.
No.
Wow.
We kind of thought we were, but then DEC says no, you need to do more, and so that's what this $65,000 that we're going to be talking about tonight at the regular meeting is for. And so anyway, that's where we're at. So that's kind of the current expenditures, and I would expect that those will. I'm hoping we're getting close to the end, but we've thought that for a couple of years now, and we're really kind of at the DEC, like we don't, like there's not, you just kind of do what they tell you, and they go and take more sample and more results, and they find more places, go dig here, find this, and tell us what these results are, take samples, and they're like, that's not acceptable, so you need to make sure that this hasn't gone down farther, and that's so. And so, are we, any other questions on that front?
I don't see any.
Okay. So kind of, here, I want to talk about tonight about kind of our administrative recommendation of where we're sitting, because the Department of Environmental Conservation said that at this point we can go ahead and fill it in just to cap it. They said they actually prefer, because there's contamination areas that are still kind of technically exposed, they said they actually prefer that those are like pushed in and capped. But then when I talked to Metco, and they said, well, we kind of need to have a general idea of what the property is going to look like in the future, so that way when we cap it and we start pushing soils around, we bring in soils, we just have a general idea of what we're going to be looking at as far as the shape of the land for future use. And so we're kind of at the chicken or the egg thing. Although DEC and the core drilling that they need to do can be done now, or it can be done after it's capped. So so it just needs to be done. And so it doesn't really matter, because they're drilling down pretty deep, and so it can be either just drilling basically like wells, so it can be done with or without. But we do need to have a somewhat of an idea of what we want, so that way when Metco comes and does that work, that they can shape it appropriately. So there was a lot of like talk about there's certain, like I would say, pieces that were I don't want to say givens. But there was ones that were very much like, yeah, this is going to be here, and there was other pieces that were like, well, maybe this could be here, maybe this could be here. And so I just want to get a little bit better idea for you guys tonight from what those things are, and I have kind of a plan that we could do short term and long term, so that we can continue moving forward, but also make sure that we're getting the community what they want in that area. So, but and we do recommend kind of that the whole site be used as a park. And this is the communication from ADEC here, and I just think it's important that we take this into account. Could it be used for something else? Yes, but that could come at a very, very high cost, and that this piece of land has become pretty unpredictable. And so I'm just going to read this out loud just for those people who maybe don't have a copy of this, but it says, as for restrictions on the property, they will be developed and identified in the covenant. So we do have to have a covenant where there's, on the back of this packet, there's kind of this draft template of the covenant. But generally for a site with these conditions, I think the main restrictions would be digging, groundwater use, and cap maintenance. Digging wouldn't be prohibited, but would require DEC approval before groundwork moving its work is performed. This is so DEC can ensure everyone is aware of the potential to encounter contamination and have best management practices for handling contaminated soil. New drinking water wells would need to be approved by DEC prior to installation. We don't have any plans for that, so we're okay there. The cap backfill on the site would need to be maintained to be a protective of contamination. So because of the depth of the remaining contamination, I don't think there would be any restrictions that would prevent you from moving on ahead with the plans outlined below, because basically I just said, hey, if we turn this into a park and kept everything like shallow structures, like slabs on that sit on top or those things like that, would that be something that this would be allowable here? And you can see her answer there. If the reason why we're making that recommendation is because if we did decide that we want to put like a foundation for a building there, or even like dig a water line into it, we'd have to do a work plan with them and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, here's what we're going to do it. We'd have to have an engineer there, and as they're digging up dirt, they'd want to be like sampling that to make sure they don't hit anything else, and if they did hit anything else, then we have to mitigate it. So as long as it kind of stays in the ground and it's there, then we're okay. But if we were to hit anything else, then obviously we would run into something that could be pretty costly. Luckily actually I'll just stop right there before I move on to the next piece. Do you have any questions from council thus far?
Questions? Okay, so what you're basically saying though is it should be a park.
Yeah, could it be something else? Yes, but I would say it's very high risk.
To just emphasize that.
And that obviously we've experienced the cost of mitigation way higher than we ever thought we would. And so, okay, yeah, so if we turn to the next page, this is kind of one of the Jesse Lee Home Memorial concepts that was presented in like the December of 2020. And so, but I would say that we know that a playground was one of the main pieces because we have ordered the equipment and it's here.
Right.
And we do think that we know in order to have like a good park, we need to obviously have a parking area because there's not a lot of street parking in that area, and so that's something that's a given. And then in this place right here where you can see where it says the toilet building, the thing that's really nice about where the planned toilet building is that the water and sewer utilities are sitting like right adjacent to that building right now, so it does not require like any digging into the site to put facilities in there. And so if you so anyway, this was kind of like the layout, and it did make sense from a previous from kind of some of those previous plans. And so if we turn, I talked to the Parks and Rec director, and so if you turn to the next page, I've created kind of my own little rough draft of what I want to, what we could look at doing as a potential like phase one. So first of all, something like this plan right here, I can give this to Metco, and this will help them understand kind of the general plan of what we want to do with the property. And at the same time too, we don't necessarily have or need to have the entire design laid out, but just having this right here will allow them to be able to fill it in like they need to, and put the right material in certain places. But yeah, kind of what we have right here is eventually down the road, we're going to need to turn that end into a cul-de-sac, just because with code and kind of turnaround regulations and stuff like that, it would be kind of a turnaround at the end of there. But we know that we're going to have a parking area in there. I think right now we could do something, just have it like gravel, and we could place like some rocks around it, I talked to Parks and Rec, and they said that they can put one of either their portable restrooms that's sitting right there right now, or at least in the short term, put porta potties over there. And then we do have the playground equipment. I've talked with Parks and Rec about, once we after we have this conversation, we do have to have a certified playground installer install that equipment, and it has to be like engineered underlayment, like just what we put down in the park right there. And so, and we could temporarily do temporary places of the benches around there and do some just basic landscaping for the time being. You can also see in that lower left southwest corner, that's where that SCLA reserved area is for their memorial piece. That was put in for the Action Memorandum 2023-005. On the next page, you can see that this is the equipment that was ordered that we have that's sitting in crates. The items are not to scale. Just to make that really clear. And then, but kind of like if you turn to the next page, this really, the photo is just kind of give you a conceptual idea of what I think that could, without too much trouble, once we get that installed and have that lay down there, we could have a parking area next to something that looks like this, and even in the meantime, just like hydroseed it, put in some trees. But it does give, I feel like, a pretty good, the playground equipment is similar. But that's something that we can hopefully get installed sooner than later, possibly start working on that this fall, depending on, or later this summer, depending on that. And then the future phase improvements. One of the things that in talking with Parks and Rec, they would like to be able to pursue some grant funding for some of the other pieces. But on that last page there, is it the last page? It is the last page. But then I do have a list of things to be completed that could be done in the long term, because there does need to be future planning. The rest of the elements that need to go in there need to be decided. But we do need to replat the area and remove the lot line and kind of add that cul-de-sac to Benson. Do we want to fence around the playground or other areas? Looking at paving that Benson extension and putting sidewalks, and then also paving the parking area and kind of landscaping around it, putting curb work, kind of like we see in parks. Looking at like permanent restrooms, and then also too, then we can look at also too the permanent installation of the memorial items, like the SCLA memorial, the historic signage, kind of typical of what HP has done for historic buildings to tell the story of the Jesse Lee home. We do have the commissioned benches. I also, in looking there was some dialogue about a mural. We also have actual park signage. One of the things that came up that we continued to hear a lot about is the need for a dog park, which was something that was in that original, one of the possible plans was a dog park. Gazebo and or pavilion construction. There was an amphitheater in there. And then also too that there's talk about community gardens. But anyway, those are, there's some future planning work and discussion that needs to be done in that area and how we want to get it laid out. And then how are we going to pay for that? Because things like restrooms are not cheap. Gazebos, pavilions, that kind of stuff as well. So, and the placement of those things. So,
okay, so within phase 1, which is the picture on page 5, basically, is it feasible for SCLA to go ahead and begin developing their corner?
Yeah, I think once and I think what we'd both be doing is both be waiting for the DEC to give us the all clear. And once that's done, then since they already have that area, that was an area that council already designated, and they could go ahead and move forward with that at the same time we're moving forward with kind of that phase 1 of putting that park place in and doing
Then
that.
as it develops.
Yeah.
Questions right now? Councilmember Barnwell.
So there's a huge amount of gravel there on premises right now. Well, big gravel and rocks. Is that basically what Metco's going to go in there and just take all that, flatten it out on there?
Yeah, and when I looked in there, it's not just it's reshaping the property. They're also going to bring in soil. They're going to be removing the fence, and there's a couple other specific items that they were contracted to do on that, and really kind of shape it for the use of what we want it to be. So it is putting that, but it's also bringing in, like, you can't really make a park with, have you seen that material? It's like, there's some heavy stuff that they dug out of there. And so it would be bringing in better material to sit on top of there, and so it can be prepared for its future use, whatever that was going to be. At this time, we're looking at park. If we were going to be doing housing there at the time, we didn't really know what was going to be done, but
And we're talking this summer.
and if DEC gives us like the all free and clear, as soon as I can schedule it with Metco to get done, then we can do that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Council, Vice Mayor, Councilman.
So the Seward Community Library Association, they just, that little corner is where we're looking at putting all the memorial stuff, or?
No.
And I'd just like to speak to that line in there. That line was just drawn in, I think.
Yeah, it was just a general area. It's not like,
Okay.
I don't want it to represent size or anything like that, but.
Yeah, I was going to have her.
That's the specific area, but on this page here, which is page 4, there's a little tiny circle down here in that corner that's like white. And that's where an existing concrete memorial is. And so, because where the red lines that you drew in are topography is just the steep embankment next to the road. So our vision is to have it behind that memorial, existing memorial, back up in here.
Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
that red line does not
Just,
represent
just the area.
the whole
Yeah.
area, but yes, it's on, the fifth slide is in here, and it's below that. And it was not an area that was identified as contaminated soil.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's outside that zone.
My other question was about just, I guess, it's not a central part of it's not central in the park, I guess is what I was getting at. It's just kind of off tucked over in the corner there. I know it's close to the road where you might see it. I'm assuming that's why, besides the fact that that monument's already there, that's why that was picked. But
Yeah.
it seemed in this version it was more centrally located and seemed more of an attraction to this park plan than this corner over here by the road. That's,
Right, yeah, the little red mark there, that's not
Okay.
accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Depiction of where exactly.
And
Okay.
and
Thank
with
you.
that too, like if we're designing something, we can have like a walkway that goes over to all areas of the park wherever things are at, and it'd be that. And not, also too, just to speak to that, we actually had that area like surveyed because we wanted to see where the property line was when that discussion
Right.
took place, because it is literally those people, like the property, those people built their back patio onto the property line. And so it is really, really close right there, and so we wanted to just be aware of that. So at that time, when we wanted to know exactly where our property was, and so when they did that, yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't a real, they couldn't tell. And it says in there that they had to find the marker and relocate it a little bit to get it accurate. It's meant to be in this area too. It's raised up a little bit too, so you can see out towards the bay, which is very nice. And then directly behind it is, as you can see, the building where one of the main buildings for the boys' dormitory there. So the idea is to have a slab and either a bench or large enough for a picnic table. And so to the south you would see Resurrection Bay, and behind is where surrounding that we were hoping to have some interpretation, visuals with the building.
The history. Thank you.
But we really couldn't do anything till we knew how people were going to get there, approach it, so.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are all memorial and plaques going to be just one area, or hopefully spread out through the park? So,
Well, that's a good question. We had ours was designed so that it would be surrounding the picnic area of here, but they, in cooperation with others that wish to do the, gazebo and do more historical stuff, it certainly could not just be in this corner. They could be throughout the whole park.
Because myself and many others would like to see it through the park.
Yeah.
As they're playing, there's something new to see. Instead of it's all stuck in one area near the road, some parents might not want their kids to go down by the road. So if we
Great point.
spread it out.
And to speak to that, I think that those are the conversations that we need to have. That's kind of like that phase 2 piece where we can have those this winter when Parks and Rec is a little bit more available, because they're going to be the ones that are planning that. But that way we can get the different groups together and we can talk about the things that are needed and how we want to make this park and how it flows and how it can be like a great park to visit as a memorial and also a park for kids to play in and enjoy. And so I think that's what you're asking are kind of some questions that need to be answered in that phase 2.
Right.
But now in phase 1, since we're moving closer and closer to getting the DEC permission and we have the gravel and everybody ready to go, we just need the general consensus and approval that when that's good, we can build the parking area here and the
Right.
playground here so that everybody knows next step we'll be able to expand beyond.
Right. And that the SCLA area will exist.
Yeah.
If you look at the memo from 2023, it says,
Right, you said.
where's the parking going to be?
Yeah.
Hopefully right here.
Got that there. Yeah, Councilmember Warner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am curious, why was the dog park put in phase 2? I would perceive that to be kind of an easier lift, but maybe.
Because of placement, and until you have the conversations with what else you want in the park, it's always easier to like, do we want some of these other items, where are they best going to fit in relation to one another? And so I think that's something that's high demand, but also too, there needs to be discussion on like, I don't want to build something, then later be like, well, you guys should put it over there because it doesn't make sense with the rest of this stuff. And so I do think it's an important feature, but we know that where the playground's going to go, that's like this fixed thing that has always existed as that right spot. But the other things were like discussion items, and they've moved in different pictures. And so I think the rest of it just needs to make sure that we have the conversation all together, and that way the pieces like fit together and it makes sense and it flows.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Councilmember Warner.
I think I read that the restrooms have to be there, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because it seems like if kids are crossing the parking area, it would be better if the restrooms
And we'll work around that. We'll make it so there's like a path that goes to the restrooms or something like that. But that's, they have to go along there kind of in that area just because it's off on the side and it's not anywhere near like a contaminated area and I mean, not well, but water and sewer are literally sitting like right underneath there.
Not too much digging.
Yeah.
And then, we're talking about dog walk. So we have a parking area, basically a playground and a restroom at this point, and SCLA is spread throughout it. The dog walk I keep hearing about, but was there another item or another thing that we had talked about that we
talked
favored?
about garden.
And also too, there was a gazebo that was also kind of planned in part of the original, like you can see like sketches of a gazebo going in there. We've also heard having like a pavilion area, because if you have a park, a covered pavilion area is a nice place to have possibly. I don't know. These are things that you guys.
That's phase 2,
phases
3.
out. Yeah, phases and like what do you want there and where does it make sense to be placed or where is its future place? And so we've had the dog park, amphitheater, gazebo, pavilion,
Community gardens.
And
Well, we can also pull out the second graders list. Of
then-
a pool tube slide, a trapdoor in ground that leads to place with Legos, a tunnel under the ground to look into the pool tunnel behind painting for a secret door.
Yes.
Yes.
And just for the public, that was a result of all the second graders coming here for a morning, and I hosted them in here in groups. So there were 4 groups, and I had them up here and had them make suggestions for this new park. And then I had them come up with a motion and a second and a vote. Our clerk helped with that on just one of the topics and discussed, winners and losers in the votes and all those things. So they put together this list so you could see what was like a pool. We thought that would be pretty cool. Anyway, that's where that came from. I tried to make it clear to them that doesn't mean they're going to get everything they asked for today. So we discussed finances a bit.
I guess it doesn't seem like we have much to decide on here, right?
No, I think our decision tonight is the go-ahead of it being park,
And
but,
then too, like, I would like to schedule a time in the fall, or be thinking like, hey, when people are less busy, now that we're flying, with summer's really going, but also when Parks and Rec is available, and maybe not maybe, but I would like to have a work session in the fall, and those
For the
groups can
futures.
meet, and, the different groups, and talk about what they feel like is best for the rest of the area, and we can even have like I think it'd be good to do copy what our engineers have done before, where we can create like a scale something, and then you can see like, okay, this is what how big a typical gazebo is, or this is a typical like dog park area, and that way you can kind of move these things around, and
right.
it's kind of a planning that way.
Okay, can I ask, I'm going to see if anyone out there wants to speak on this. We've got like 20 more minutes. Rhonda, go ahead.
Go ahead, sure. You go first. All right. This is exciting. We're a lot further along than I thought we were going to be, so this is great. I've been doing research on the Jesse Lee Home for Children, and I'm hoping to go before HP with, if not all the work done, the majority done, and pursue a CLG for the historic signage. And Jason, you and I met while I was still on the commission a couple years ago about the gazebo and then putting the signs in there. But it sounds like it might be a great idea to do it, Mr. Fitch said, which is to place the signage around, so there's more interest. So,
Yeah.
at any rate.
But we'll have the groups together.
Yeah.
on-
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Rhonda?
I was thinking of when we did the waterfront park, and we had a company called Leathermans and Associates come forward and pretty much take over the whole project and bring folks together and formalize it, and came up with a materials list and all the different groups that were going to, coordinated all the different groups that were going to donate their time and their money. And I really would advise, I know it may cost more, but I think that may be a good way to go, in the sense of bringing all these groups together and formalizing that, rather than they could bring it into kind of a formation of what everybody wants, and have a formal conceptual drawing, and then take that out to people for fundraising. And I don't know, you said you're 430 or 65,000. There's a lot of folks out there that would love to contribute to this project, I think. It's a historical area. We have the Seward Community Foundation. Chugash put forward money to help demolish it. I'm sure a lot of Native Corps would be interested, since many of the orphans were from the Native communities. This is a really exciting project. Props to the city for coming this far, but I really think that we need to formalize the space too, and make it a big deal. And I don't think the city should, maybe they can match some, but I don't really think that the city should have to come up with that much money, because I think there's people out there that would love to donate to this. And I will tell you, from planning and zoning, we got parking on the agenda, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think you have too many parking spaces.
So that was just that was not like a.
Yeah. Yeah, 39 is a lot, and we're really learning a lot about parking, and I just encourage you all to tune into that. There's a whole paradigm shift going on with parking. I don't think you're going to need 39 parking spots up there. So.
And Mary?
I just would like to also make another comment. I know Bob brought this up, the location of the restrooms. You've got the playground right there, and that's it's the parents and the kids that are going to be using that, and they have to go from the playground across the parking lot to the edge.
How else
So,
they can do that, though?
Yeah.
if this could be moved maybe on the other side of the parking here, I know it's going to need water and sewer, but those are not real deep trenches we're talking about in there. So it could be that, I think for safety, the restroom should be on the park side of the parking. Anyway.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It may be too late, but this dog park, this is where dogs are unleashed and run around, right? And there's children playing?
No, it's fenced in.
It would
It would
be
be
a fenced
It's a
in.
fenced
Oh,
in
so
area.
it's separate?
Yeah, it will
Oh,
be
all right.
separate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
Completely
just a
separate.
suggestion,
Yeah.
though, that's, you know, we're
Yep.
working on that. Tom?
Well, two things. Bob asked a very good question, how did it become so contaminated? And I remember a long time ago, I was with Dale Lindsay, and Dale was saying that, you know, of course, this was originally built as the Jesse Lee home, and then the Army took it over. And Dale said particularly during the Army period, they were really sloppy. They'd leave oil all over the place. Sometimes they used bunkers, sometimes they used diesel, and it was contaminated mostly during the period when it was run by the Army during the war. And they didn't really care where they were dumping stuff. And Dale said that's the reason that it requires so much cleanup. And as far as contaminating and backfilling soil, every place that I've ever dealt with in Seward, including the Harbor 360, and Seward got contaminated with diesel during the earthquake, when all the tanks erupted and everything. Pretty much every site along the waterfront has a DEC restriction on it, where they say you can't dig without having a DEC approval. So, you know, backfilling, digging a trench, backfilling it, getting DEC approval, that I don't view that as a big deal, because I've done it on pretty much every property we've ever been on. And I fully support the kids park, although my number one thing is always housing. How do we get more housing, and could we put some multifamily housing next to the park? And also, 33 years ago, when we bought our house on Dora Way, the guy I bought the house from told me that the city was a year away from putting the road through, going straight down Dora Way, connecting right into Benson. And since then, I've talked to people and said, why aren't we connecting Dora Way into Benson? And they said, well, Jim Pruitt owns that lot that's right there, and Jim won't sell us the lot, and that's why they haven't connected Dora Way to Benson. But if, you know, people would come off Dora Way, they could go to Benson, they could go right up to the high school, they wouldn't have to go, you know, all the way around. Right now, everybody coming down off Dora Way and off Hilltop and everything goes down Phoenix, and the most crowded location in Seward is Phoenix and the Seward Highway, where if you put that, and so I talked to Tracy. So I went over to Danny today and I said, who owns this lot? He said, Tracy Williams, which, as you know, that's Jim Pruitt's daughter. And she's very, you know, Dave Williams, who had Two Dollar Trucking, his wife, they own that property, and they said, you know, we'll do whatever's good for the community. And so I think there's a high likelihood that, and I said, I can't negotiate on behalf of the city, but I'm going to bring it up tonight that, you know, putting, because right now there's a pathway, and I talked to Doug, and he says, right now we've only got a 30-foot right-of-way, and we need that other lot if we're going to put the road through. But I think as part of this process, instead of doing this, I looked at this cul-de-sac, and Jason's right, it takes up a whole lot of real estate, where if we just connected Dora Way straight into Benson, I think that should be looked at, and of course, that's way out of the area where the contamination is. So anyway, I think as we look at this, we should think about that instead of doing this cul-de-sac thing.
Okay, good. Good research. Bring it back. Yes,
Thank you,
Councilman
Madam Mayor. Yeah, as far as, I mean, that's a growing neighborhood. When I moved here in 93, nobody wanted to live up Dora Way because of the traffic, all the kids, and, you know, Halloween was a nightmare. To this day, we know that. But we need this park there, and I believe we need a large parking lot because I have 8 grandkids, and in the summertime when I go to a park, there's no parking because every park in town is full on a sunny day, so you can't have too much parking in that area. You know, we're not on that subject yet, but the garden plot, I'd like to bring up my concern is anyone that's a gardener knows You grow a garden, you attract moose and bear. That's a moose and bear area. So that garden would bring in more moose and bear into a kid's park.
That's the point.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes.
On the parking issue, I don't think it's gonna be as bad as like the waterfront park because it's more residential. And the tourists kind of hang out down here.
And that's,
So-
we would go that way.
So, right. So my thought was that we maybe don't have to have as much parking because
That'll
We'll
be,
get to that
that'll be a
point.
discussion. Yeah, one of the attractions of having a playground here is that it is a residential area, and the words have been used before that this will be something for the locals, something for us, as opposed to in the summer, you know. I mean, I see it also as just a really neat opportunity for kids to have two really good parks to hang out with, you know, but as the beginning. You know, my interest in history, I want all of the history of Jesse Lee Home preserved out there as best we can too, so. Anything else from council? Administration, what do you need from us?
My thing is that we're looking at this basic kind of layout, that I don't think like the cul-de-sac necessarily affects it, but we know kind of generally where our parking lot is, and just to speak, like that design was just a previous design. I was showing that for history. I don't think we need 40 spaces.
No,
I do think,
that was
yeah, I do think that we could shrink that parking area quite a bit and probably gain more park. There's some other things we can do, but I think generally located, we can, if you guys are okay with this kind of general idea of how this might be laid out, and it plays with a lot of variables that we can talk about later as far as a road going through, or some of these other pieces, but we can factor those in, but just that when we can tell Metco, this is kind of generally what we're looking at and what we'd like to, we know its future use is generally gonna look like. Is this enough, for, you know, and then have them kind of grade and fill it in accordingly once we get DEC's approval to do so. And then we'll plan that work session for the fall for developing those things.
Councilmember Finch first.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is all adjustable, we just need the go. Right.
The general,
This is
the
just
general
all
layout.
adjustable.
Yeah, the general layout, just so that way if they're looking at like, hey, this is gonna be a future like parking area, kind of just general area, they're gonna probably like do some different things and put some different, and especially if we're gonna have it as a gravel parking lot temporarily in that general area. So, you know, we can just, with that, they're gonna put different material there than they would if they're gonna be looking at like a place where the playground equipment is gonna go, or, you know, grass, that type of thing.
Did you have, okay. Anyone else? Are we good?
Okay.
Great. In agreement? This is exciting. I'm hoping all the second graders are watching this and realizing. We'll get back to them as third graders. Anything else for the good of you? Okay, well, I'll adjourn this work session at 6:43. We'll be back at 7 with our regular meeting. My voice holds out.